we go ahead, travel again a bit more to the east, southeast. Peter Ray, our president from Australia, who is based in Tasmania. He told me that he has, because of the situation, Peter has no PowerPoint, but Peter, I can hopefully hear you now, Peter. Peter?
Hello.
Yes, very good. Let me briefly introduce you then. So Peter has actually, I think, more or less started his career. He used to be a senator for the state of Tasmania. Later, you became chairman of Hydro Tasmania, the utility of Tasmania, and you made it a renewable energy utility. First, mainly based on hydropower, but you also introduced wind energy. After leaving that position, you still advise the government. You do that, I heard, also on the Corona situation now. And you have been president of the World Wind Energy Association now since 2015, and I'm happy to hear from you about the situation in Australia. Peter.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity. The report from Australia needs a little description of background to be able to understand what I want to say. The fact is that Australia is 9 democracies and people vote both for state governments or territory governments and also for the national government. So there's a Commonwealth, 6 states and 2 territories which are involved in obtaining votes from the public. And this explains part of the problem which Australia has been experiencing. I just concerned, can you, I don't see anything on the screen. Do you, are you able to?
Yes, you just go ahead, Peter, please.
Righto. The coalition is the government in Canberra, in the national government, that has both the Liberal Party and the National, or otherwise known as Country Party, with a strong connection with rural coal mining electorates. Plus there is a Senate with no government control, but a mixture from hard right to very left green members. And so programs are not always able to get through the parliamentary process. The policies and programs on renewable energy development vary considerably throughout Australia. But let me start with just the Commonwealth and the explanation. Coal has very strong support, particularly in the regions. Employment is very important to those regions, and the very high export trade earnings are important to the Australian national economy. Renewable energy support is there at a federal level, but rather quietly, as the majority of those in favour of renewable energy development do not wish to split the governing coalition, but do wish to achieve climate change targets. And good targets have been set by the Australian government in Paris and elsewhere locally. The states are mostly in favour of renewable energy development, have programs accordingly. The result has been the rapid growth of renewable energy, notwithstanding apparently ambivalent government, federal government policies. So then to turn to the figures for 2019 year, wind with 24 wind farms are under construction this year, but solar is also developing very rapidly. In 2019, new wind was 6,196 megawatts at a cost of $10.25 billion. But solar also, as is happening in other parts of the world, has been developing even more rapidly than wind and is catching up with that in 2019, 5,769 megawatts at a cost of just over 10 billion. It should be noted that renewable energy projects reaching financial close were down to half in 2019 of that in 2018, but the projects completed in 2019 were double that of 2017 and approximately the same as in 2018. So you get variations in relation to the time taken from financial close to the completion of a project. But what it's seen, if you take it over a several year period, there has been a very strong development of both wind and solar. In summary, Australia is experiencing a renewable energy development boom, but there is some uncertainty which is showing. Let me just move on then to 2020, where wind farms are under construction or committed, amounting to 11.1 gigawatts. There are 9 in New South Wales, 6 in Queensland, 10 in Victoria, 1 in South Australia, 3 in Western Australia, and 2 in Tasmania, with another one expected to go very shortly. So what's been the result of this development? What we've found is that the national target for 2020 of 33,000 gigawatt hours of renewable energy was met nearly 15 months early in September of 2019. And that is probably the single most telling figure of the development rate of the several past years. Let's look at what's been happening in Australia then. How did it happen? What were the principal factors involved? And one of those was, and probably the single most important, the fact that the Commonwealth Renewable Energy Development Agencies are working very well. ARENA and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation are 2 major organisations which are stimulating and assisting in the development of renewable energy. It's also supported by the major banks and others lending institutions, including the superannuation funds, which are strong collectors of funds in Australia. There are state programs as well. Coal has a difficulty in attracting any finance, and so ageing plants are not being replaced. Other factors include that state governments outside the coal areas are strongly in favour of renewable energy and have programs providing for that encouragement. 3, there are foreign investment in Australian renewable energy projects has accelerated the development of skills and funding, with Goldwind having played a strong role. And Goldwind is certainly a major developer in Australia. Growing public concern over climate change has also been a factor. It's been growing quite strongly. The introduction of large-scale rooftop solar has also given people an interest, a practical interest in renewable energy, and has strengthened the support for the rollover to renewable energy. The establishment of the Office of Wind Farm Commissioner is a very interesting one, because the background to that is that there was a heavy campaign, particularly in the state of Victoria, to paint wind turbines as dangerous to public health and an ugly blot on the landscape. This was encouraged considerably by the Heartland Institute of the United States, assisting some people who, for one reason or another, were opposed to the development of wind. But the Commissioner has investigated the complaints, identified the fallacy from fact, and lo and behold, we have complaints down to 8 only last year. Investment confidence has grown, as did the developer skill in social and environmental considerations and the need for social license. And this is one of the things that in the early days, some developers did not pay proper attention to obtaining the necessary social license. But now that has changed very considerably. And I can only add that I'm glad to see that that has happened. We set the pace, I think, perhaps way back in about nearly 20 years ago, when with Hydro Tasmania, we undertook a very detailed social licence development program. There were other factors as well, but one of them, I think, probably to mention is product of research and development, which has been going on, part of it private, part of it state or federal government agencies. And a whole lot of that has been very beneficial. Another element for growth has been the development of solar, from being mainly rooftop to solar farms and storage. And there's been a very rapid growth of that in the past few years. Earlier, it was a development of rooftop solar, such that in January 2020, there were 2.31 million solar PV systems and that for a population of 25 million people is a fairly high penetration. So this increased public interest in renewable energy flowing on to support for wind and solar as well has been seen. As well, there have been 385 community programs funded by the Commonwealth Government and state governments. The WWEA 2012 award to Hepburn Community Wind Project in Victoria did provide considerable encouragement for this type of development. And I was very glad to know that they responded very positively, and Australia responded positively to that award. Looking to the future briefly, there's electric motor vehicles, which I had expected would develop rather more rapidly than they have in Australia, but it is developing. There's an energy consumption per capita question, which I don't know how far the coronavirus pandemic is going to impact on that. Australia's personal consumption per capita is one of the highest in the world. I'm sure it will continue, but there is a need for energy efficiency policies to be developed. The other thing is to take into account what will be the reduction of energy use by the shutdowns, which are part of the implementation of the coronavirus pandemic control. And it may have quite a significant impact, and it'll be a question of how we recover from that, but that's an overall economic question as well as a specific one in relation to renewable energy. Increases in home use will not be anywhere near what is used for travel, business and holidays, big office factory operations, etc. So demand is already dropping quite significantly. There'll be an opportunity to review the rollover to renewables, to take stock of what has been achieved and how to guide and finance further as old coal-fired stations close down. Finally, I'm proud to repeat a recent WWEA media release which referred to the Tasmanian target, which is now increased from 97% renewable energy, which we experience at the moment, to 200% by 2040, as we develop our wind farms and pump storage and provide what is expected to be the battery of the nation. It's a great future to look forward to, and to look back on how Tasmania has played a leading role in the development of renewable energy, not only in Tasmania, in Australia, but in other parts of the world. And I thank you for the opportunity to give this brief overview of what's happening in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And indeed, it's very interesting what you say, that in spite of a federal government which is not so supportive, there are state governments strongly supportive, the case of Tasmania, but also citizens and communities are driving this development.